Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get in the Cashflow Game Podcast with Kenny and Kay. Today we're gonna keep on talking about real estate like we always do, but today we are going to talk about your why and why multifamily and what is your why. So the benefits of multifamily and why you personally are driven to invest in anything, but in our case, multifamily.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody this week. I think every week I talk to somebody. They're always like, I always tell people, I'm like, look, nobody is going to turn down, I want to buy something to get cash flow. That's literally like, if you talk to anybody, everybody's like, of course I'd like to own rental property and have cash flow. Like, nobody's going to say, nah, that doesn't sound fun. That doesn't sound good.
Making money doesn't sound like fun.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people that we meet, whether they're buying a single family or 2 to 4 unit or a multifamily, look, if the people already own it, I think most of them know why because they've already got past that point. But a lot of people are coming to us. So, and Krystle knows this, they're like all excited to get in this and that. And I stop people, I go, okay, cool. So what's your why? What does that matter? I go, oh, it matters. Then they go, why does that matter? I just said, it's going to matter because your why to me determines how serious you are, if you're passionate about this, whatever. Because I really, truly think that if this is something you really want to do and, quit your job, fire your boss or whatever they call it, right? You really got to know your why and you got to make sure you're passionate about it. So I think knowing your why is big. And I don't know if we talked another episode about what the game plan is, but I think they go hand in hand. So,
well,
Krystle, I'm gonna ask you and you ask me. So what is your why? Whether it's 1, 2, or 5 things.
What is my why? There's a couple. There's more than a couple. So right now I would say my why is that I want freedom to do whatever it is that I want to do. So if I want to wake up tomorrow and say, I don't want to do loans anymore, I want to be able to say that. If I want to wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, let's just pack up and go on a trip, like spontaneously. I want to be able to live my life on my terms and have freedom to do so. And then it comes with all those other benefits. So I guess that is probably my one major why, but it's going to allow me to spend more time with my family when I want to, allow us to travel more, allow me to have freedom to make business decisions because I want to, not because I have to. So that's my biggest why.
Okay.
What's your why? Is it similar? Are we on the same page?
My why is, I think my why is very similar. I think, for me, I could dive in a little bit more, but I'm not going to, let's just say I'm going to piggyback on yours. You already said that is obviously, I think, as the girls get older, I'd like to be more and more a part of their lives. I think just from a fundamental place, because I think it's going to be important. So I think when your kids are a little bit older and you're not there, it tends to cause problems in their life. So I'd rather be around more. So I think, investing and doing this would give me that ability, which really comes down to freedom.
Yep.
But the other thing, I think why a lot of people do invest in real estate, I think us too, currently in the future is, I think another thing is, the generational wealth, but also the taxes. The taxes are so big. And I think when you understand that part of it.
Well, you're getting into the benefits right now.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that is a why. A why for us. Like
for you. Yeah, I get it.
Like we are going to buy a building this year. Like even if, look, the market sometimes like, doesn't make sense, but it's like, there's people that buy real estate every year depending on the market because they literally have to because of tax reasons.
And it's not necessarily that they have to, but if you look at your, if you meet with your CPA and you're planning your year, what your income looks like, and then your CPA is kind of backing into that saying you can expect to pay X amount of taxes. Some people just go, okay, well, it is what it is. I'm going to pay tax. And some people go, well, how the heck can I not pay taxes or pay a lot less in taxes? And so for us, that's what we do. We look at our income. Okay, our income's looking like this year. How do we have any operating losses that we can apply to that income? If not, what does our tax thing look like? Okay, now how much real estate do we have to buy in order to avoid paying taxes or to at least significantly reduce it?
Yeah, so I think that's a big why. The other thing I'm just going to say is that when we say freedom and stuff, I think some people think like I'm going to buy some buildings and just, get off the grid and leave. That is an option, but we're not doing this to be like, I never want to work again because we are passionate. So that's why I said it's like, I think you do have to be passionate about this because look, it can start as a side hustle. For a lot of people it usually starts as a side hustle, turns into, I want this to be a full-time thing. But passion is good because I think you really want to enjoy investing in real estate and do that. And if not, maybe you're just really passive with it. Like, here's my money to syndicate or a REIT or somebody else, and I'm out of here. So anyways, I just want to put that in there. Some people think like they just do this and they never have to work again.
Yeah, well, owning real estate, like I think if you're going to own your own real estate, it's not a passive thing. It can be much more passive. Like, you're not trading your time for dollars necessarily. So you could be on vacation, you could be sleeping, you could be hanging out with your family, and your tenants are still going to pay their rent, and you're still going to make cash flow, right? So there is a passive aspect to owning real estate that you don't have to trade your time for dollars. Which is really good, because you get into that. I think initially when you start working, you're like, great, I can, I work this many hours, I can make this much money. And then you realize, like, wow, life is really long. So do I really want to keep working a certain amount of time to make a certain amount of money? And like, when do you want that to end? And if you want it to end anytime soon, you got to get to work. Like, you got to figure out how to make your money work for you. So I think that's like the biggest thing. And I kind of transitioning, because you're sort of talking about some of the like benefits of owning multifamily. I had a conversation yesterday with a guy who found us online or something, and he was saying,
shocker.
Yeah. So he was saying, I own a bunch of like 2 to 4 unit properties, and, I'm talking to friends, and like, so asking me all these questions about multifamilies. Like, I'm talking to some of my friends, and they're like, oh no, you got to, own 5 to 15 units, because then you have to get an on-site manager. And, like now property managers and like real estate, like the rates are higher and the loans are more expensive. And he's like, I'm hearing this from other friends. I'm like, God, how terrible. You'd have to have an on-site manager. Like, what would that be like? And he's laughing, but it's really funny. So I think it depends on who you talk to. I think, we've said it so many times before, but you have to be careful who you get your advice from, because a lot of times, like what I heard from that conversation was whoever he's talking to is scared of multifamily. And when you're scared, some of us jump in and learn more, and some of us just stay away from it and continue doing what's comfortable. But we've, talked about the many reasons why we think apartments are the right way to go, and the more apartments, the better. But let's dive into some of the benefits of owning multifamily. In your mind, what for you are some of the benefits?
What I like about multifamily is you could start with a 5 unit, and by 20 years later, you can end up with a 100 unit building. Mm-hmm. So what I like about that is the scalability, right? And so I know most people, they start at 5, they go, there's no way I could ever get to 100. But when they understand the game and how this works over 20 years, you could be there in a lot less time, as you and I know, right? So I like the buildability, because if you own 5 homes to go to 100 homes, that's 100 homes. It's not that like we're saying it's bad. It's just, this is one building. It's, maybe one building or 5 buildings and roofs. It's not 100 roofs, 100 air conditionings, 100 backyards, 100 front yards, all this stuff. So I like the scalability, because we understand the management side of it. Also, I think is with multifamily, it's not about really, there's comps, but it's also, you can create value within the property, right? So you could buy a property, you could do things to the property, you could,
Hang on, let's go back, because you're going in a second thing. But like, let's just focus for a minute.
You asked me.
Yeah, but you said something really good, is that you can go from a 5 unit to 100 units. Yep. And why is that so important? I mean, like you mentioned, if you own one single family home, for one, when that tenant vacates, it's 100% vacant. You have zero money, and you probably still have a mortgage to pay. You definitely still have taxes and insurance to pay. You still got to pay the landscaper. You got to get everybody in there. When you own a 4 unit, somebody moves out, you're 25% vacant. How much cash flow are you really making on that? So I know people feel really comfortable in this box of having, 4 unit properties, because they can get a 30-year fixed mortgage, and, they can do all this stuff. But I think that is one aspect of safety that you don't have in multifamily, for example. Like, you can't get a 30-year loan. But do you really need a 30-year loan? Like, how long have people ever, like, how many people do you know that have ever kept a mortgage for 30 years?
Right now, if people are refining low rates, maybe this will be the longest run in history after this. That's my guess, because people are probably not going to refi, because they're like, I can't get any better.
But in this environment, how often are people refinancing?
Oh, of course.
Sometimes every 6
people
months.
People refied
sometimes
twice last year. They refied twice, in the beginning and the end.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people didn't even wait 6 months to refi.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense. So no, I totally get it. No, I get that factor. I was talking like just more like why more the benefits of multifamily. I just said the scale's big, but I'm
right.
not
So
talking
from a scaling perspective, we're saying basically the larger the property, the greater the efficiency. So there are people who are maybe scared of going into multifamily because, financing is scary and you don't, there's these other things. But what I kind of challenge people with on that is, so it's not scary to you that you own a single family home and when somebody leaves, like that's money you're losing. Like that's not an investment. That's now becoming a liability to you. So if you
also too, if you're going to stick on that, let's just talk about it. Somebody vacates the property and you have a single family home that's 1,500 square feet, right? But they do damage and you collect the 1 month's rents. Well, just to replace the floor on 1,500 square feet or this, you pretty much could have just washed your cash flow.
Or even to just paint. Like if let's say you have to paint,
So that's depending on the standard too that's in there. Like I don't know where your home is, but you could have to have a certain kind of standard to get a certain type of tenant.
So like you mentioned, for example, our 30 unit building. That's if you had 30 individual homes, you have 4 walls, exterior walls on each of those homes, front and backyards, like all those things. So at our 30 unit building, we have maybe 3 roofs that you would have to of 30 units. And there's 3 buildings with, the 4 walls.
Yep.
So I have 12 walls that I have to worry about. Right. And 3 roofs instead of 30. So for me, I feel much more safe. And let's say if I have 2 units vacant, I still have less than 10% vacancy. I'm still making plenty of cash flow when my units turn. So for me, that's where I feel safe. And speaking on the point of somebody saying, oh, an on-site manager, I love our on-site managers.
Well, that's just, to me, that's a lack of experience.
Right, for sure. But there are these concerns for people who are looking to make that jump from maybe 4 units to 7 units or 10 units and to keep growing. Certainly, I mean, our on-site manager is amazing. I mean, we have her go check things for us without having to go to the property. We have them do a lot of things. So that was kind of an interesting thing that I heard yesterday from another person. So yes, there's a lot of different dynamics with multifamily, but you can certainly scale more and the cash flow becomes more exciting. I mean, if you have a 4 unit and you're making $1,000 a month in cash flow, that's okay. But when you have a 30 unit and you're making $13,000 a month cash flow, that seems a little bit more exciting in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and also too, like if you get to a 100 unit building, what you gotta understand is when you start, you get to 15, you get an on-site, people forget, but when you get to 60, 70, 100 units, it's actually really great because you have an on-site, right? That's like literally you have somebody that works
full-time employee on-site
that does the leasing and this. Then you have a full-time porter, worker, whatever you want to call it, handyman guy that's on the property. So they're dedicated. Then on top of that, you have your storage unit, and you're like, what is a storage unit? That has all the little, like it's your little Home Depot, right? You got the plumbing parts and all this. So instead of some guy having to keep charging to drive to Home Depot and all this crap, it's on the property. So it's very efficient. It's easier. And then you can sometimes bring help in. So it's just great because they're there. And sometimes both parties live on the property. And so when something happens, somebody's there all the time. So from not just efficiency, but from a customer service, eyes on the property, it's like 24/7 almost because somebody lives there. I just like that factor. Because if not, somebody has to call, they got to go there. When you have a house, somebody gets to call somebody, they got to go there. You got to get out of bed.
Or even a 5 unit or a 10 unit.
But when you have an on-site, we're like, what do you mean? You just call them. Hey, wake up. We got a call. They probably got the call before you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just like that aspect of it.
So kind of going back into what you were starting to talk about, which was basically increased NOI equals increased value. That's sort of the second reason, another benefit, a huge benefit of multifamily versus residential. You can kind of compound on your example of your 100 unit building,
Yeah, I mean, it's great because, look, it's pretty simple. You can have a 100 unit building and you go, oh, Krystle and I go, we're going to raise the rent over the next year on every $100. Everybody's like, $100 a month? What's that? And then you go, oh, wait a minute. That's that's $10,000 a month. That's $120,000. Oh shit. But then you go, oh, that's a lot more cash flow. But then Krystle goes, well, let me throw a cap rate on it and back it in my sizer. And that makes the value of the building worth probably what?
You have a phone.
She's the pro, not me. It's just an example. If you have a 100 unit building, you add $10,000 to it in a San Diego environment.
So you're going to do $120,000.
$120,000.
at like a 5 cap, let's just say like conservatively, you just added $2.4 million in value to your apartment building, in addition to getting $10,000 additional cash flow. So
so just to stop real quick. So just stop and think about that. So if you have a guy that has a 1,000-unit portfolio, just stop and think about this. And he raises his rents. He goes, I'm going to raise my rents. No, I'm going to raise my rents over my buildings 100 across the board over the next 2 years. And you just take that equation right there. He just made $24 million.
Yep. So
what happens is it's simple. Like on houses, when you add value, it's based off comps. People call me and go, hey, I'm getting a lot more rent for this house. It's 4-unit. I'm going to make more money, right?
Yes,
No.
you'll make more cash flow, but you're not adding value.
No, but it's worth more. No, it's not. Why have this cap rate? No, you have to have a comp to support it. Even though we have to have a comp, but you're going off with the rents. You know what I'm saying? And so you could have a weird, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath that's hard to find comps, and they don't really have that. You might not get you're not going to get the extreme as you would with like a multifamily.
Yeah, and I was just explaining this that same guy yesterday that you're scared with multifamily, but the good news is you can build equity so fast. Like for example, even just any kind of value add, like for example, us adding the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit onto our 30-unit building. I mean, it's going to cost us maybe 15
grand,
probably 20, but at the end of the day, we're going to have one extra unit on our building. So if comps at, I get to include that income for financing. I get to include that income for value. So I'm literally going to increase my building by at least $200,000 by spending $20,000 to have an ADU approved. So for me, that's an excellent return on investment. I don't know how else you're going to do that. I mean, and speaking of that, a lot of residential lenders are not looking at properties with ADUs the same way that we are with apartments. For us, if it's a legal unit and it's been permitted and everything, we're counting it as a unit. We're counting that income. For you on the residential side, you're not. So it's not correlating in value for you. It's not necessarily helping you from a financing perspective. On us,
we get the value.
You do get the value.
We get the value, but here's the problem: is no, you get the value, but you can't use the rental income towards your income.
Okay.
So if you're buying a 2-unit with an ADU, you can use the legal 2-unit income, but not the ADU because Fannie and Freddie doesn't recognize it. The other problem is you have some appraisers out there that say this is an ADU. It's technically not a 3-unit because the zoning for a 3-unit is different. What's different? Krystle, what is it? Parking. It's got to have this structure, that. Look, we've seen some ADUs done. You couldn't say that's a 3-unit. You would not pass the building inspection. You wouldn't even start. There's so many more loopholes to get around.
Right. So then they're getting maybe like $30,000 in value for their ADU.
No.
Versus...
So you can have an appraiser. We've seen it. Like one gives you this, another one gives you. So there's this argument. The appraiser, no, that's not worth it. It's worth. I'll give you $80,000. No.
And most of these people are spending more than that amount of money to even get their ADU approved. So that's a very frustrating experience. So it's an inconsistent experience at best on the residential side.
It still adds value, but it's not as consistent to the value you're going to get with the multifamily and how people look at it.
Another benefit.
Yeah, it is. I would say another huge benefit. I mean, it's funny because the financing is competitive, and the bigger you go, the better the financing. I mean, people like if you know Grant Cardone that's buying, $100-200 million deals and putting $80 million down and getting a 10-year IO at 2.25, or Michael Becker that's locking in $100 million deal and getting a floating LIBOR, Freddie Mac LIBOR, and he has floating rates at 1.75 and 1.9 to 2.0 with a cap on it from JP Conklin. It's ridiculous. Like Michael Becker's like, I locked in at 10-1 IOs at 4, and now I'm floating rate at 1.75. I'm tripling my cash flow from when I originally underwrote this deal. We're making 2-3 times the cash flow.
And then also speaking from a more realistic standpoint, if you're going from residential to commercial, our rates are pretty competitive. I mean, you can get rates as low as 3.2 on a 5-year to maybe, 3 and a 3.75 on a 10-year. The rates are pretty competitive. I think, the difference is you're not going to get the 30-year fix, but we've got competitive financing. We have interest-only options available that are going to help increase your cash flow. So the financing is very competitive. It's for me, it's very competitive. It's been at competitive rates for a very long time. So it's sort of a myth that the financing is not good. Certainly things cost more. So let's say, for example, the appraisal, I think, is the biggest one that stands out. But in the same token, if you're doing a residential home and you're paying, you're going to do a $200,000 loan and it's costing you $500 for an appraisal, that feels expensive, right? But if you do a $1.5 million home and the appraisal's $600 or $700, whatever, that feels a little bit more reasonable. Same.
I mean, a 4-unit appraisal now, it costs about $1,000.
Right. So like a 5 or a 6 unit building, I mean, generally our appraisals are costing anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500. So on a 6 unit, that feels expensive. On a 30 unit, it feels like a drop in the bucket. So it's really the same thing as from residential to multifamily. But certainly it's more because you have more units. You're looking at cap rate, you're looking at comps, you're looking at price per square foot. You're like doing all these different comparables to evaluate the value of an apartment building. So it certainly does cost you more and you have more units. So again, I think on a per unit basis, it's not really that much more expensive than residential. You're just seeing a number that's larger than what you're used to seeing on a 1 to 4.
Yeah, and the other thing is the cash out. So the problem when you go, let's just take a 4-unit, right? Even if it's conforming, your max at 70%. Okay, but as soon as you start getting 70, you start to take a hit on rate for sure. Like you're going to be paying discount points because the rate's sky high. The other thing is okay, I'm talking conforming. What if you go buy a 4-unit and it's a jumbo, it's by the beach or something? You start getting really whacked on LTVs because you go to a private bank, this, and they're like, oh, I've got this $3 million, 4-unit, great. I VRBO it, whatever. I rent it out, great. I'm sure they get good rents, but they're like, I want to go yank 75% cash out. Ain't gonna happen. Some of them are 50, 60%. They're like, what? But you can go get an apartment building. It's by cash flow. So if you have an apartment building and it's worth $10 million, they don't go, well, Krystle, you're in the jumbo 10 million, so we're capped at 50%. That's not how it works. So as you go higher up in the jumbo space with residential lending and people have these coastal properties, we get calls all the time like, hey, I want to yank this out. I'm like, there's no lender that's going to take your 4-unit beachfront that's worth $4 million, great, and give you like 70%. They're just not going to do that, So
and we value, we qualify your loan based on the cash flow of the building, so that we're not going to give you a loan to at a level where the building's not cash flowing to cover the payment. So, and then we also, they put a buffer in there. They want to be safe. So, honestly, why would you want to buy a building if they can't cover the payment? So I get it. That's the kind of scarier part is that we use a debt coverage ratio and you might not get the 75% that you want. They might qualify for less, but there are strategies and other things that you can get. There's bridge loans, there's, interest only loans. Like we've got a lot of competitive options on the financing front. So, and certainly with refi cash out, we don't have the same, we don't usually have the same sort of seasoning requirements that you hear about in residential either. So if you buy a building and you add value to it and you want to, 8, 9, 10 months down the road, go refi and pull cash out. We do have some limitations, but you can actually get credit for the money that you've invested into the property. And we can underwrite based on the new income that you're getting and get you cash out based on that. That's a very unique thing that you can't necessarily do in residential. So certainly so many reasons why the financing is competitive for multifamily.
Yeah, one more thing I'm going to say on that. You brought a good point. So I do residential financing. We do a lot of 4-unit properties and it's, people do make cash flow, but I do get people come to me and they go fix up their 4-unit property and they have a massive loss in their tax return. They go, well, I did this and I did that. I go, great. So can we add this back in? No. Why? We don't do that with Fannie and Freddie. It's black or white. So you can get said, well, I just redid all the 4 units. I redid the roof. This whole thing, it's one time. We're like, they're going to hit you with it. But if you went to Krystle and you're like, hey, I bought a 30-unit building. I vacated it. I spent $700,000 in improvements. And then Krystle gets your tax return. And however you did it, there's just massive expenses on there. Well, Krystle's like, what'd you do? She can just go get the list. Here it's common sense underwriting, go to the underwriter, go, oh, okay. So they're not going to penalize you on your, like basically what I'm saying is you get penalized on your income from residential. They're not going to penalize you as that.
For capital improvements.
Exactly. So there is that difference. Moving on to, I think the other benefit I want to jump into is I wanted to say 1031 exchange. And what I notice is people when you're when you're selling a multifamily and buying another multifamily and somebody's buying your multifamily, it's just a different game. When people sell these $100 million deals, the Krystle will tell you, sometimes they don't close for 4 to 6 months. And you're like, what? First of all, the loan might take 90 days. But secondly, when you're selling a $100 million asset and you're exchanging $70 million, you probably want to make sure you identify a property and you execute and you don't have a tax liability, because that'd be a big problem. So the one thing in residential I find is a lot of people sell and then they want to go exchange out in an environment like this. And they're like, well, what if I don't find something in 45 days? But they're used to a buyer coming in saying, well, I have a 30-day lock. What do you mean I got a 60 or 90-day lock? That costs, like my client, like right now, we have one, she has to do 60-day lock. It's a huge hit to extend the rate. And she's like, why am I paying for this? I'm like, well, you got in contract. Well, why can't they close quicker? Well, they need an upleg. Well, they had an upleg, it fell out. Now they're extending the whole thing to the whole time. So I think this is like 60 days. So Krystle's business is more used to that. Residential, everybody wants to close 30, 45 days. I was just throwing that in there because I think when it comes to multifamily and you're scaling up and you're exchanging, it's just more common in your environment to like go if people want.
We have a little more flexibility. Our rules are not super hard and fast.
But you guys
like let's say that we do a 60-day lock with a lender. It's usually a 60 to 90-day lock. For one, we usually have plenty of time, but let's say that the seller needs to extend because they can't find their upleg and you're running past your lock a little bit. It's not a hard and fast, like you lost your lock situation. They're pretty flexible and a little bit more common sense. I mean, this is a business loan. This is not like a consumer, loan. So we just have different rules that we go by, and it's handled more like a business transaction, a little more common sense.
And the other thing on the 1031 is, this is from Dean Graciosi when he's interviewed by Grant. Dean went out in the last crisis crash and bought 2,500 homes, and he told Grant it was a great decision to how to manage them all. And then it was even better decision, even a worse decision when I had to sell them all. Sell them all at the same time and exchange into multifamily. He's like, I almost died from the stress, because you can imagine, so
coordinating the closings to happen all very closely together, how many exchanges, stuff falling apart, trying to keep it together, all of that. Yeah, it becomes very stressful. And we've had a lot of clients personally who did that, especially in the last downturn, where they bought a bunch of single family homes
or condos.
They made huge returns. It was great, but the selling property to trade up was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. So my point is let's say you own the 10 homes or you own the 10 units. The 10 homes, you got to coordinate, you got to sell them together, you got to exchange them together, you got to put it all together, and then you're going to go try to buy that bigger property. But if you own a 10 unit, you sell it. It's just easier. That part of it is easier, and not, if one or two houses fall out, but you need the money to buy your upleg, it could just cause a problem. I don't know if it's bridge financing or what, but
yeah. The other reason why I really like multifamily too is that there is multiple ways to invest. And I don't think, I think a lot of us are hearing about syndicators and all of this, but I don't think a lot of people understand what it is. So, I mean, of course you can buy your own real estate. Great. Okay. But some of us don't want to, maybe you have your own business. Maybe you have a job that requires a lot of you. Maybe you have that and you have, young kids and you just don't have the time to dedicate. And maybe you just aren't like as passionate about it. You don't want to go out and build the relationships, put in the offers, negotiate the offers, walk the property, do all the due diligence. Then, find a property manager, manage that person, review all the stuff. Like, you just want to give your money to someone and you just want to get a return on it. That's what I love about multifamily is you can buy it directly if you want. You can buy it with a partner if you want. And then you can also invest passively if you want. Like, you can still invest your money and make money completely passively if you want, and still have your money working for you and giving you a return and still owning a piece of something that's going to appreciate and have, give you equity. And you're going to definitely, like, when that asset sells or when you refi, you're going to get a lot of your investment back in many cases. And when you sell, you're going to get, more money to go then invest again. So, the compounding interest is a really great thing. Even if you don't have the time, you can do it passively and, kind of keep rolling your money into something greater, whether it's to leave it for your kids or if it's for retirement or any of that.
No, I mean, I think I'm not saying I don't know any syndicators or REITs that are buying homes. I'm sure they did, but I would say it's way more common for a syndicator to put you in a multifamily or some type of commercial property or something like that than, hey, we're going to put a syndication together and we're going to try to buy a tape of 20 homes. Like, I'm not saying those days were over, but those were probably a little bit more. Maybe they're coming up if we're going to see a foreclosure price or something.
I think there's actually a little spike in single family investors just because there's been such a big focus on home since COVID. I think there is. I still think, like, for me, I want to stay in my lane and stick with multifamily because in the long run, it's better. And I've learned, for me personally, because we've invested in a lot of different deals, whether it's like construction deals, single family, other property types. And for me, I really feel good about putting my money in and immediately getting a return on it. I don't personally really have an interest in investing in something that will hopefully bring me a return after spending even more money on it for years to, like, hopefully maybe probably get a return. Like, multifamily, I've said this to so many people, is like pretty much a sure thing. I mean, let's say you buy a deal and you don't buy it right and you don't get the return that you were expecting. It's still very hard to lose in multifamily. Like, you have to completely neglect your property and just ignore it and not do anything in order to lose it, in order for it to lose value, in order for you to be underwater or get it, have it taken away for foreclosure or whatever. It's just honestly like the safest investment I can personally think of. Like, people always need a place to live. Rents are going up. Homes are getting more expensive. I mean, it's just one of these things where you kind of have to be a real idiot to lose.
And they did really, and I mean, as of now, it's done really well through COVID. So when we shoot this, the other thing is, which is huge for real estate in general, but multifamily too, is the tax advantages.
Yeah.
You buy a bigger building, you can do a cost seg on it, and you can manage it yourself.
You can do that for your residential too, by the way. I mean, we're doing a cost seg on a 4-unit that we've owned right now. A lot of people are like, that's kind of like a foreign concept. And certainly you have to talk to your CPA because I believe you have to be considered a real estate professional to really take advantage of those benefits. But so I think the goal is to get to the level of being an actual real estate professional. Either way, you're still going to get some write-offs. It's just you're not going to get as many if you were a real estate professional. But certainly once you get that classification and you can do cost segregation studies, not only that, but like right now, the CARES Act through 2020, I mean, it's going to be over, but you can take your losses and apply it to the previous 5 years of income. So that's a huge tax benefit that people are taking advantage of right now. We certainly have. In addition to the Trump tax law that allows bonus depreciation. Sometimes you don't even have to do a 1031 exchange because the bonus depreciation is better, and it will kind of cancel out the capital gains. So there's some very complex tax advantages to owning real estate. So you definitely want to have a CPA that's experienced in working with real estate investors and knows those laws and can advise you on it. But there are some serious tax advantages, and that is why so many of our clients have been able to not pay taxes. They make millions of dollars a year and they pay little to no tax. That's because they are real estate professionals and they understand the game, and they're working with a CPA who understands it too, and they're really utilizing the law to its the fullest extent.
Yeah, even passive. I mean, I do loans for a lot of people, and underwriters don't even know how to underwrite them. So, they send me a K1 from a syndicator or REIT, and they're in 2 massive buildings, and of course it's -50,000, -50,000. So I have to call them. I need the tax return. I can't get the tax return. Like, you can't get a loan. Why? Kenny, I made money. I know you made money, but not on paper. Did you pay tax? No. Then you didn't make money on paper. So then I got to go call this indicator and say, can you send me the tax return? Why? Oh, okay, we get all the time. And I get it over here. And this 500-unit property has $3 million in depreciation. Then I take my calculator and I go, okay, Mr. So-and-so, you own 10%. That's this. I add it back to the loss. And then all of a sudden I send it in. The other, I was like, oh, wow, this is a loan. The guy that lost $100,000, he really made $200,000. Holy crap. He didn't even pay any taxes. And they look at it and go, wait a minute, he didn't pay any tax. I go, no. oh shit, this is they just, the light bulb clicks for everybody. They go, wow, this is crazy. So even though that person's not a real estate professional, they're just getting the normal depreciation of the property. Yep. And so they're getting a K1 that says negative 50,000 when he's like, no, I make $8,000 a month cash flow. So that's really cool.
Yes, I always say saving money is making money. So the less money we have to pay in taxes equals, that means that we're making that much more money. So
I had a quote today. We have to keep talking.
Okay, I'll keep talking. But I wanted to tell you that there is one other benefit to owning multifamily that we haven't talked about, and that is using your IRA to invest. Most independent contractors, such as ourselves, probably have a very weak 401k or IRA. But if you've been working in a job and you've been contributing, like a lot of people contribute the max to their 401k, the thing that you may not know is that you can use that to invest in real estate. Oftentimes, whoever's managing that account isn't going to tell you that, and you may have to convert it to a Roth. So you need to talk to a qualified professional about that. But the great news is that you can grow your retirement using your IRA or your 401k. So I think that's a huge benefit, because if you don't have a lot of just cash in the bank per se, but you've got a really healthy retirement, and you want to make that grow. I mean, I think we all know, it's funny because I took a class in school when I was young, and it was like, give so much money a week, put so much money a week towards your retirement, and by the time you retire, you'll have $1 million. Well, that's great, but I don't know that in these times in Southern California that anybody can live really that comfortably with $1 million, just depending on where you live and your lifestyle. I think you're life is long. So if you're 59 and a half, that's a long time to live off $1 million. So this is a great way to continue to grow your retirement and through real estate, and still kind of get in the game of passively investing and making cash flow while, that you're not physically working for.
Yeah, and some people get to, older in life and they're done playing the stock market game and they did well, but they're just like, okay, I just want to just like Krystle said, the safest, easiest, let's go. And then over time, if they buy a property, that property will go up. The quote that I had this morning, it's not how much money you make, but how much money you keep, how hard it works for you, and how many generations you keep it for.
And who's that by one of your favorite guys?
Robert Kiyosaki.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's the whole point of it,
Yeah, I mean, Robert Kiyosaki's like the king of making your money work for you. And it really resonates with us as well. I think you realize that, you spend your life working really hard and you want to have something to show for it other than, wrinkles and gray hair and maybe a nice house or a car or something. You want to have cash flow. You want to be able to live a life on your terms, even if you want to keep working. I think it's just nice to have that there. And then, of course, for us with kids, we have 2 kids. So I want to have something to pass on to my kids, but I also want them to understand the value of work and, investing in the properties and how we've made that happen. So we introduce them to what we're doing. We bring them along when we're going to properties and checking things. And so it's a very good learning lesson for them. So I think that's also a benefit as a parent. For me personally, I think it's just a very good lesson in, learning about how money works for our kids.
Yeah, we were, this last weekend, we were at our house. I was talking to Kevin's daughter. God, why are you asking so many questions? And I was just like, she's 16. Yeah. Her friend's 15. I don't know what, something like that. And I was like, so what apps are you guys on? And what's this? And I was like, so I asked, I said, what's the biggest stress in a 16-year-old life? And I was shocked at the answer. They're like, success. I was like, what? And I think because we live in a world where you can find all of this information online and you see all these things. So she was telling me 16-year-olds and people in high school, they want the house, they want the car, they want to be successful. At that age, there's already a stress to get there.
I could see that because at 16, you're like, man, I'm getting close to graduating. And then I'm an adult and bills.
So we were talking about how to market on like TikTok, and she's like, you guys should get in there, and she says if you just fund and stuff, but she goes, you guys can help educate. So, the point is that I feel like I meet so many people and I always tell the same freaking thing over and over. It's like the conversation from 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. I can literally tell you if I look at somebody's financial situation at 6 years old and I get on the phone and I have a conversation and they figure out what I do, I guarantee you, I can write down exactly how the conversation is going to go in, because it's either the person I'm dealing with either didn't save enough and they're like trying to make up for lost time, and they're like, damn it, I shouldn't have bought the car or the house and all this shit when I was younger. And they look just even a simple compounding interest. I could have put money in the calendar. I could have a lot more in retirement. And they're tired. They're burnt out. And now they're like, I don't want to work 10 more years. I don't want to do this. So I keep saying the same thing. The younger you get started and start learning this stuff, all the information's out there. This isn't like 1980 where you got to have your grandma or your mom or get on your bike and ride to the freaking library and go tell the lady, where do I find real estate investing for dummies? And she pulls out the little thing and gives you a card, and you got to go walk through the library and find the stupid book and pull it up and then go, can I rent this? And then if you don't bring it back in time, they start charging you for overcharges fees like Blockbuster. This is simply go on Google or go on Amazon or listen to podcasts, and the information's right there. Like Krystle said, is if you're going to do this, you should start educating your kid as well, like what you're doing, because if they're going to inherit this, or stuff like that, it's just as important. So it's like, once again, why multifamily? I think the other thing is too, is the generational wealth of it, the passing it off. It's like, you can pass your kids $10 million. I guarantee you they'll piss it away. But if you pass your kids $10 million of free and clear property and they were in the game with you the whole time and they understand it, they might want to maybe yank some cash out to grow it or something. But I mean, Krystle, you meet more people than I do where kids get the money. It's half and half. Some get a building. They literally sell it. And that shit's like Ferrari, Porsche, nice house, this. And other people are like, hell no, we're going to like fix up the house. And they're like, we've been in the game. We've been helping grandma or grandpa, manage this shit for 20 years. Now it's my turn. They didn't want to do this. They didn't want to do that. Well, now they're out. Now I'm going to go pull the cash, redo it, and do that. I mean, we've seen both, so.
For sure, yeah. I'm always surprised by the amount of people who don't see the generational wealth aspect of it. Like people who are inheriting, like the first thing they want to do is just like sell the properties and take the cash. Like that is what they want to do. I mean, I see both, but more often than not, I see people just wanting to sell the property and take the cash. And I think it's because Bobby Castro talked about this too in a video we were watching. If you don't know who he is, he's a big multifamily owner. His story is really cool, and he's super entertaining. But he was saying the importance of teaching your kids, because you don't want them to lose it all. And that happens so often too. Like, we didn't come from parents who have a lot of money. In fact, like we joke, we're like, we're going to get like bills to pay when our parents die. It's like, we're going to get liabilities, not assets. So, yeah.
This cup's empty. What's going on?
Yeah. So it's like one of these things that, a lot of people do the job of doing the investing, but they don't get their family involved and understanding why and what is this about and why are you even doing this? Like, what is the point of this? And why do you even like it? Like, this isn't fun. And, it's like we were saying, another guy that sold his company and, made all this money. Well, he wants to go, be the developer building $50 million homes in LA because it's the glamorous thing. Like, nobody wants to drive by your, apartment building in National City, and, that's not sexy, right? But, making money is sexy. Like, not losing your money is sexy. And like showing your family the value of creating wealth and why you're doing it all is just a recipe to like have a better guarantee that they're not going to lose it all and that they're going to understand. And that education is just so important, because how sad would that be for us to like, for example, us to create all of this and then our kids just go piss it away. Like, that's not happening. I can tell you that right now. I'm not going to let it. But, it's a lot of planning and a lot of time and investing in their education and, creating a trust or whatever that doesn't let them do that anyway, all that stuff. But the generational wealth aspect is a really, really big key. So you build wealth for yourself, and then that you can pass that down to generations and generations.
Yeah, and honestly, it's really cool. I mean, because we get to do the financing. And I mean, I can't mention names, but Krystle knows people. Like, I think about there's lots of different people, but is one grandpa, some of them didn't do anything crazy. They just bought property. They just were a simple person. They could have been a teacher. They could have been a painter. They just had a business, and they just saw the vision, had passion, and bought property. They weren't even that good at it, but they went and bought 2 buildings, 3 buildings, 5 buildings, but then they pass away. And then you realize that those buildings are feeding 4 or 5 different families. And they're getting $250 a year. They're getting $250, cash flow. That it changes life. So some of them are lazy, some of them are, hustlers, but it's the point. It's amazing how somebody builds something and this gets passed, but it takes care of people too. So it's really, I'm saying this because a lot of people don't see it. Oh, I hear about it, this and that, but it's really true. This happens right now. All the money that's getting passed down. We're living through the greatest transfer of wealth ever. And the next, look at the politicians that run our country. They're in the ninth inning here, folks. Let's be honest. There's the whole regime's moving out. Look at Jerome Powell. Nobody knows. That guy's worth $150 million. What is he doing running the Fed? Whatever. But the point is, all these people have money. They're going to go inherit it. But and if you take a look like Donald Trump, you don't have to like him. You can hate him. Whatever. That has no point. But when he passes, his kids are not going to sit on their ass. They're going to go take the empire and make it bigger, because he basically
laid the foundation.
Exactly. So,
and maybe I guess people would argue before him, his father laid the foundation, but he continued on the legacy, and you can see it's being passed down to generations.
Exactly. So thanks for listening. That is the benefits of owning multifamily. And if you ever have questions or comments, please reach out.
Yeah. And if you think anybody who would needs to hear this, who would be interested, we would love for you to share it, and we always appreciate a review.
Thank you.